General Blaine Holt, retired Brigadier General in the U.S. Air Force, and Rebecca Grant, National Security Analyst. General, let me begin with you. One of the key things, and perhaps a difficult conversation, is the amount of percentage of the GDP each nation is going to put towards their own defense, towards military. I believe Poland has been leading the charge there and is actually ahead of schedule. But what about the rest of them? Are we seeing action there?
Well, you're seeing action across the board. The problem is they've driven up the costs of defense in the continent because they're not following President Trump's lead in terms of diplomatically ending the Ukraine-Russia war. But we're well beyond money in terms of what the problems are with the transatlantic alliance. The money is actually the smaller issue. Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance before him have warned Europe repeatedly about running away from Western European values, civil rights. They've destroyed their economies. They're preferencing net zero over industry. And those are the pillars of this alliance that keep us unified and aligned. And now they've failed us in terms of the straits and not supporting us and not letting us use our bases. So there's a lot more than just what are you paying for defense these days?
Yeah, well, to that point, Rebecca Grant, Dr. Grant, President Trump saying this about his disappointment in the NATO meeting at this bilateral meeting this morning. Let's watch.
We've invested trillions of dollars in NATO. Why? To protect European countries and others. You would think that they'd be very willing to do something to help us, and they really weren't. And I've long said that we helped them, but I'm not sure that they'd be there for us. And Italy turned us down, and Germany turned us down, and France turned us down. And it's okay. But, why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars and they're not there for us? We've always been there for them.
Yeah, Rebecca, characterize this alliance right now. It does seem to be a bit strained. And also President Trump, a few weeks ago, he was threatening potentially leaving NATO.
Well, two things here. One, a lot of NATO partners made very weak statements during the combat phase of Operation Epic Fury, and that still really grinds on President Trump. The other thing is there's a backdrop here of the EU antagonism towards U.S. businesses. A lot of our big tech companies, they're trying to write laws that would keep our space companies out of their constellation. So that's a kind of constant background disruption. That said, I think President Trump's presence in Ankara is there to show that NATO can be and needs to be strong. Russia is a huge threat. The European allies are scared to death. They need to up production of Patriots. They need to put an armored brigade combat team in Poland, a U.S. one on a permanent basis. There's a lot to do. So I think he's going to chide them for sure, but then look to move forward.
General, on the sidelines, how significant will be the discussions about whether or not President Trump decides that he's pulling back forces, that he's pulling back weaponry?
Well, we're going to have a force structure review. We've made that very clear to the NATO countries and at the G7. I love what Dr. Grant's saying about the predatory tactics of the European Union. It falls right in line with this thing is much more complicated than money. But we do care about European security. And so what I believe President Trump invariably is going to do, and I believe he's the only man who knows what is going to be put on the table, is, okay, you want NATO to exist, you want the transatlantic alliance to endure. Well, here's the new terms of the deal. And you're going to follow. And if you don't want to follow, then that'll help us with our force structure decisions.
Very interesting. General Blaine Holt and Dr. Rebecca Grant, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.